All right. Well, we have a little bit of a development for you. John Lynch came on KMBR this morning and he said that Trey Lance is indeed back in the 49ers facility after the cooling off period yesterday. Of course, Lance was not at practice, a more dramatic day in our 49ers coverage. It does seem that the 49ers are returning to business as usual with the Chargers game here in the preseason coming up tomorrow. So we can now calmly plot the path forward for the 49ers. This is something that I did on The Athletic with an article that came out this morning. This is in the description. Again, the 49ers are the team that is the most compelling in the NFL as far as I think a combination of the on-field product and what happens off the field. They have so many star players. They have two number 3 overall draft picks in the quarterback room. Those two were in a QB2 battle against against each other, with pick number 262 being the QB1. All this stuff, it's really, really hard to envision it being scripted because it's so compelling, but we have it here. So it's a good chance to sign up for the Athletic because I think our coverage is the deepest of the team that there is. And in this particular piece titled Trade, Keep, or Cut, I examined the 49ers options with Trey Lance. And John Lynch today essentially reiterated what Kyle Shanahan said yesterday on KMBR, that it's likeliest that the 49ers keep Trey Lance. And I think John Lynch was more forceful about the potential of keeping Trey Lance. Kyle Shanahan talked about it being an option that he wanted, but he also talked about doing right by Trey, which means exploring trade options. John Lynch, from the GM's vantage point, I think he was realistic. And the realistic situation here that the 49ers are dealing with is that there's not likely much of a trade market for Trey Lance, with a caveat, which I'll get to here in a little bit. But based on everything that we've gathered, based on just using our brains, the demand for a quarterback like Trey Lance, especially at this time of the year, just as teams are about to cut to 53 players on their roster, the demand probably won't be high because Trey Lance with the 49ers is a developmental QB. Trey Lance with anybody would be a developmental QB. He's got 102 career pass attempts in the NFL. Trey Lance, from his freshman year in college to now, has fewer pass attempts than Tom Brady had in one season at age 45. So he's still a project. And yes, there might still be a ceiling there. Obviously, the floor is still low because, well, he's still a project because he doesn't have that experience. Jim Trotter, who writes for us at Athletic today, talked about the need for a developmental league in the NFL, how it might be perfect for Trey Lance. I agree with him because there is no great home for Trey Lance at the moment to develop. And the 49ers actually might be the best home. The key that I emphasize in this article, because there's not much of a trade market for Trey Lance, the key that I emphasize is that the 49ers are going to continue treating quarterbacks, and Trey Lance is the QB in question right now, as assets, as currency. That means you don't just give them away for free. You hold on to an asset just like at this time last year, you held on to Jimmy Garoppolo as long as possible because the options that you keep by holding on to assets can sometimes give you a nice twist of fate in the right direction. Last year with Jimmy Garoppolo, that definitely happened. You can't put it out of the realm of possibility that Trey Lance will get meaningful snaps for the 49ers this year if they keep him, given the injury history that the 49ers have suffered at the quarterback position. So they're going to keep Trey Lance unless they're impressed by an offer. There's likely not much of a trade market for Trey Lance, but I'll have to say this. If a trade does happen, the 49ers will want to make their team better right now. And I should probably fix the typo. There we go. They should probably make their team better right now with a trade. So this is important to consider because most trades in the NFL, you recoup draft capital through the trades, right? The 49ers wouldn't be able to use draft capital that they attained in a potential trade of Trey Lance until next April. That doesn't help them in the 2023 season. And it is imperative to consider that QB depth with Trey Lance on the roster in the now, right now, has value. This is a team that ran out of QBs last year. This is a team that only made it to the NFC Championship game because it had plentiful quarterback. So there is value, no matter the fact that Trey Lance is very raw right now, no matter the fact that he's obviously worse than Purdy and Darnold, there is value in having Trey Lance on the roster. So if you're in win now mode as the 49ers, you only part ways with Lance if it improves your win now probability. And there is some value in the win now probability to having Trey Lance on the roster. So anyway, my conclusion is, and I write about all this in the piece, but my conclusion is that the 49ers would rather trade Trey Lance for a player right now than a pick, because a pick doesn't help win now. Pick helps win in 2024 prospects. The 49ers are trying to win in 2023. There are obviously some positions of need. People will frequently talk about swing tackle for this team. Yesterday, the offensive line coach, Chris Furster, straight up said the 49ers need to see more out of Jalen Moore, who entered this training camp as the 49ers' top candidate at swing tackle. The other candidate at swing tackle, Matt Pryor, has only been playing on the right side. So offensive line depth is an issue for all teams around the league, and that probably doesn't help the 49ers in bartering for an offensive lineman. Teams don't want to give up good swing tackles, but they do potentially have a trade piece in Trey Lance. The question is, how much of a market is there? So maybe the 49ers will be able to swing it to get a player back that helps them, save up some cap money if they do trade away Trey Lance. It just doesn't seem likely. So when I wrote this article, trade, cut, or keep for Trey Lance, I came to the conclusion that the likeliest scenario is the 49ers keep him. Keep him until a situation arises where it's actually profitable for the football team in the whole, when you're factoring in all the considerations to trade him. That's what, it's a different situation with different variables, but that's the path that the 49ers took with Jimmy Garoppolo last season. They contorted themselves really to keep him on the roster throughout the new league year in 2022. They restructured a couple contracts so they could fit Garoppolo's money on the which wasn't guaranteed onto the roster. That bought the 49ers time through the offseason because they weren't just going to give a quarterback away for free. It was business. Remember, I call it business 101, and it ended up being good business for the 49ers. They ended up benefiting greatly from exercising option power with Jimmy Garoppolo, because he ended up playing for them and playing well for them when they needed him in 2022. He built that bridge between Trey Lance and Brock Purdy. So Lance, they're more tied to Lance than they were to Garoppolo contractually, since all of the money for Trey Lance is guaranteed. But, you could just look at this through the same lens. He's an asset. The 49ers should treat him as such. So you have the article. Go ahead and check that out up on The Athletic. I have a lot of writing to do today. We're obviously still sorting through the pieces after yesterday's news, but we're also gearing up for the 49ers to cut their roster down to 53 players. And that has to happen on Tuesday. And that might be an inflection point for Lance, since the 49ers have to decide if they're going to carry him on the roster or if they're going to try to trade him away, if it is possible before then. But they have to decide what to do with Brandon Allen as well. Obviously, Purdy and Darnold are going to be making this team. Trey Lance very likely will be making this team. But this is all part of a larger puzzle. The 49ers have to figure out how that entire 53 is going to work out. And there are opportunity costs to everything. So if you carry 4 quarterbacks, which is unlikely but possible, if it includes Lance and Brandon Allen, you're not going to be able to carry a body somewhere else on the roster. Is it worth it for the 49ers? They want to buy more time with Trey Lance and see if a quarterback demand in the trade market increases over the regular season before the trade deadline? That's a calculus that they're going to have to make. And they might be forced into carrying Trey Lance. Again, if there's no trade market, they might be forced into doing that. But they won't be forced into carrying Brandon Allen. They still might decide to do that with 4 quarterbacks. It's all on the table. We've seen wilder twists and turns in this entire 49ers quarterback saga. Anyway, I have many, many more thoughts. So we'll be back with those a little bit later today. For now, check out the piece on the 49ers strategy: trade, keep, or cut Trey Lance. This is examining the 49ers options with him ahead of the final preseason game and ahead of the roster cut down on August 29th. We'll see everybody soon.